My name is John Flett. I'm a pediatrician who helps parents, children, and schools with kids that think and learn differently. I'd like to talk to you about bullying in children. Are you a parent with a child with ADHD who's recently gone to a new school or has over time had some difficulties with navigating friendships, socializations, victimizations? Is your child a victim of bullies at school? Or perhaps is your child the perpetrator of being bullied and then bullying other kids? And these are things that are quite common with ADHD. Believe it or not, 50% of every child with ADHD is a victim of bullying, and 16% is a perpetrator of bullying. So these are things that are common, and it's important to know how to deal with these things because it can undermine self-esteem, it can make your child very unhappy, and it can be the cause of disruption of other children in the classroom, also outside the classroom. So, I wonder whether you kind of recognize some of these sort of descriptions, saying, my child is being bullied or picked on, victimized. I don't know why those other kids just pick on my child. I wish the school would do something about it. I've complained to the headmaster, teachers, heads of department, and yet my child keeps on being victimized. It's so unfair that my child has to undergo all these kind of emotional turmoils because of other kids. Why do they target my child? Or, what you might also experience is calls from the schools complaining that maybe your child bullies other children. And you might think, well, those kids just must stand up for themselves. Why does this happen? So children with ADHD have huge difficulties socially, and that's what I'd like to try and illustrate, is that ADHD is not just a school problem, it's not an academic problem, it's not just a concentration problem, it's a problem of being different, behaving differently, and also not being able to regulate, not being able to be as self-aware, to change your own behavior, and also recognize that, maybe a child with ADHD tends to kind of talk too much, interrupt, argue, be a bit rambunctious, push, always want to be in the front of the line, impulsive, unpredictable. And this makes children different. By grade 3, almost 80% of children with ADHD are rejected by their peers. And these are things that can be addressed if we intervene early and work with the school and with other parents. So the risk of perpetrating bullying, boys are more likely than girls, and younger children are more likely than older children. The strongest predictors of a child who is going to be bullied or is going to do the bullying is a child who argues too much. Other significant factors are kind of children that need a lot more assistance, that have learning difficulties, that children that are different, they stand out because they are different. And children other kids, they can be very cruel. That child's a dummy, he can't finish his work, he's stupid, his handwriting's horrible, I don't want to be his friend. And, a child who has difficulty regulating the emotions, their buttons are easy to push, they have difficulty regulating and staying calm, and they have difficulty sustaining friendships. And of course, lack of interest and engagement in schoolwork in general. So, the risk of being bullied is the difficulty in being able to maintain and keep friends. Kids that also have financial difficulties in their family, developmental delay, sometimes intellectual problems, and friendship difficulties, but the frequency of the school contact with the family is the key, So, often if a school makes contact with issues, parents are responsive, and parents, if they're concerned, they contact the schools. These things that can be mitigated and dealt with and really kind of nipped in the bud. So the majority of children, that's about 64% of children with ADHD, who take medications, those are the ones that also are going to be also susceptible. So medication does help, But how about the children with anxiety, mood, oppositional defiance, behavior problem, emotional difficulties, and also, with learning difficulties, making them different? So how do you address this? I would say, first of all, make sure the communication with the school is good. If there's a problem, don't delay. If you recognize and you have a gut feel as a mother or father, deal with it. Put it in writing to the school. It's very important that you don't just talk about it. Those things can be forgotten. It's hearsay. Put it in writing, email it, and talk to the teacher as well. And then escalate it if things are not actioned. If you don't see any kind of appreciable action and results to solve a problem. Over my time as a pediatrician, I've dealt with so many children that have been bullied. And I've had children who have actually almost had abdominal pains and gone into casualties, emergency departments where everyone thought they had appendicitis, depression, school avoidance. It can be subtle, it's teasing. Obviously teasing is something that one accepts as part of school, part of kids learning to sort of kind of deal with. And sometimes it's almost like a test of a child who joins a group to see how they're going to be able to handle themselves if the group is threatened. So, teasing them, okay, that's kind of acceptable. But when it goes on and it is something that's relentless, it's targeted, it starts to cause huge discomfort, can be physical, can be verbal. So, if your child's been bullied at school, how do you learn and teach your child to be able to deal with these things? First of all, your child needs to understand that there's nothing wrong with them, that they might be a bit different, but they've got to look that person in the eye and tell them immediately, because something that is allowed to persist, it kind of gives that other child who's doing the bullying a lot more energy, and it encourages them. So, teasing and playful banter are absolutely inevitable part of childhood. But children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder don't know how to respond often. Parents need to encourage those children to stand up for teasing without overreacting and obviously without physical reactions. So alert your child, teacher, and the school principal about this issue. And suggest the school establish some rules. Different schools have different ways of dealing with this. I'm very happy to say with a lot of the schools I am involved with, there is a very strong zero tolerance to these problems, and they dealt with immediately. But sometimes the school don't know about it, and you need to kind of be your child's advocate and being able to communicate that. So encourage your child to stay calm. You might be able to just count to 10. It's like your mother said, count to 10, you're going to make a much better decision. Take a few deep breaths before responding. They could, the way to kind of deal with teasing for a child, rather than sort of trying to argue, because that just encourages the bully. Sometimes a child might say, well, they might be bullied to say, look, you're always finishing last in class. The child might, use humor to be able to overcome that. It's very difficult to kind of come back once you've had a comment where somebody is dealing with humor. At least they can see part of the problem. They might say, well, I'm just doing it more thoroughly. I'm just doing it 3 times, so I had to get it really right. And the other thing as well is that, you've got to be able to teach your child to really be verbal about it. Once he has a response, once your child stands up and has a verbal response to that bully, it's amazing how those other children back down. But don't be overreactive in an emotional way, because that's just a way to provoke. And then, of course, for your teacher to get involved and help communicate with your child. And also encourage your child to stand straight and help them with the body posture and kind of language, because communication is not just verbal. It's looking in the eye, confident, not slouching, it's looking down. It's to be able to help them to understand those verbal communication skills. So, and then also ask your child, make sure that you keep having contact with your child, because they're not going to tend to verbalize that easily. And if you notice that things are different, if your child is kind of changing personality, doesn't want to go to school, becomes unwell, sometimes psychosomatic symptoms, it can have a huge role in the impact on a child's academics. So you don't want to further erode their self-esteem. If you've had any experience with this, and you've had some experience and some tips that you'd like to share, please put it in the group, and we'll talk soon.